Okay, I'm gonna talk about 2008 financial crisis. It's also called Great Recession. It's one of the most horrible recession the U.S. economy has suffered from. Um, it's one of the most, but it's second biggest recession in the U.S. history, I believe. The biggest one is Great Depression in 1929. It was worse than 2008 financial crisis, but this one was also really bad. And we should always start with definition. The definition of recession is prolonged downturn in economic activity, often measured as declining GDP. So if GDP goes down, that means the economy is in a recession and economic activities decline. GDP is gross domestic product, which is uh, value of total value of final goods and services produced in the economy over a period of time. So if this declined from the previous year or previous months, that means the economy is in recession. Uh, you know that that in other words, to put it more simply, it's economy is producing less goods and services than previous month or previous year. That is recession. Uh, you know, goods and services can refer to anything. Like it can be food, it can be other retails or um, entertainments, any other production. If the production of goods and services are declining, that means economy is in recession. And when that happens, that always coincides with high unemployment. It intuitively makes sense, right? When firms are producing less goods and services, they need less workers because they're not producing as much as before. So they're gonna fire some employees, and that's gonna lead to unemployment. So if you look at 2008, unemployment goes up all the way until 10% in 2009 October. That is very very high. Remember, unemployment if unemployment is around 5% or 4%, 3%, economy is probably in a good shape. Yeah, it's in a good shape right here or here. Right now, it's not horrible. It's like 3.5 in 2024. It kind of like it's going up a bit, but it's still 4.4. Not bad. It, its economy is at full employment level. Um, However, in 2008, so many people were unemployed. They were looking for jobs, but they couldn't get jobs because, from the perspective of firms, people are not buying much, so they don't need to produce much. They have to cut. They have to cut down their production, and a lot of bankruptcy happens too, which is not hard to imagine in a recession. And let's start with cause of recession. This great recession in 2009, 8. So it was caused by a speculative bubble of housing market and eventual drop. So housing market is where houses sold and bought, right? Buyers and sellers come together and they trade houses. That was constructed. So that's housing market and price. We all know the price goes up when demand is high or supply is low. Uh, Vice versa, price goes down when demand is low or supply is too high. And we can tell that up until 2008 or somewhere around that, the housing market has shown rapidly increasing price of houses, right? It's going up, and then it rapidly declines. So this is what happens. And why this happens? It's because demand is very high for houses in this period. People buy houses. A lot of people want to buy houses. That was the situation. And and at this point, when speculative bubble is happening, people are demanding houses not simply because they want to live there or they think they can have a good life living there or anything. It's more like a like they're doing that for the purpose of getting profits, getting margin of profits. So if they buy houses when price is at $200,000, and a few years later they sell it when the price is $250,000, they can gain $50,000, right, as a profit. That's amazing. A lot of people want to do that. A lot of households and investors uh, realize that they could do that. So that's why a lot of people join housing market and buy more and more houses, and that further drives up the price. But eventually, that can't continue forever. At some point, they're going to lose confidence and just sell it, and too many people follow them and sell all these houses that they have, which is going to lead to decline in uh, price of houses because of very high supply. So, and when they realize that the value of their houses is declining, that also incentivized so many to just sell it before it goes down even farther, because they want to minimize the loss, right? So this is what happens. That's why it's so rapid. It's not really like gradual decline or gradual increase. It's rapid increase and rapid decrease. That's what happened around 2008. And but why did this lead to recession? I'm going to explain. There are three main things that have happened here. So first of all, it's uh, declining housing market or housing prices led to falling housing constructions, and for the businesses that deal with housing, like mainly construction of houses, they realize that the value of houses, the price, market price of houses are rapidly going down. So they're not going to make as much. They're going to stop construction. They're going to cut production. They're not going to make as much houses, and they realize that they have too many employees that are working to make houses. So they're going to fire those people, things like that. That leads to recession because those people who get unemployed, who just got fired, they lose confidence. They don't want to buy as much goods and services as before because they're not employed. They're so scared of future, right? Probably a lot of those people have low consumer confidence too. So this is what happened, but that's not the only thing that happened. Another thing that happened is falling consumer confidence due to drop in value of their homes. So it's not only about the construction industries, housing industry, people who are affected by this. All these people who own houses, whether they bought it at this point or long time ago, they all lose confidence when the value of their assets and properties goes down. It's a universal thing. Like you don't get happy, you don't get confidence when your property value goes down rapidly, because that means the potential price, right, that they could have sold their house at is way lower than before, right? Or it's going down quite rapidly. So a lot of people realize, like, okay, now we're not optimistic about future. That's what a lot of people will say. A lot of household will say, because of the rapid decline in the value of their houses. That's gonna influence their decisions when it comes to shopping, consumption, consumer spending. So they're probably not gonna go to expensive traveling, buy a bunch of luxury stuffs, or buy a lot of expensive unnecessary leisure things like that. They're gonna defer that. They're only gonna focus on they're only gonna keep buying those like basic necessities, but they're gonna cut down their consumption, and that's what happens in the entire economy, and that is a bad news for firms. Firms realize that people are not buying their goods and services. What are they gonna do? They're gonna fire people because they don't need as many workers when people are not buying the products, goods and services that they're producing. So they're gonna fire a bunch of people, and what happens when people are fired? Same as what I explained in the first, in the first part. People lose confidence even more. All these people who got unemployed are probably not gonna spend in an optimistic way. They're gonna be really pessimistic about their future, um, and it's not only about those people who lost jobs. A lot of people think that they might lose their jobs soon when they see a lot of people getting laid off, right? So they're all gonna lose confidence. They're gonna make decisions that focus more on spending rather than consumption, and that just intensifies the unemployment even more. That intensifies the recession even more. So yeah, people are not buying stuffs. If people are not buying stuffs, firms just shrink their production and uh, fire people, and that itself is already a beginning of recession, because again, going back to the definition of recession, it's about decline in GDP, decline in the total production of the economy, in the economy. When people are not buying much, firms obviously cut down their production. They have no choice to do that. It would be stupid to keep producing at the same level when people are not buying much. So this is how recession happens, and this is how unemployment goes up, and it continues to go up, and it continued until it hit 10% in October of 2009, which is extremely high. Yes, another thing that happened, third thing, which is very, very, very important, is bank insolvencies because of mortgage default. So imagine, like, going back to this graph. Uh, let's say some people bought houses at when prices was at this level, right? And they realize after few years that the value of that houses has gone down by a lot. to the extent that the market price is lower than what they paid for to buy this. And a lot of them are still paying for it, because remember, a lot of people who buy houses, they don't pay all that money at the point of purchase. Some rich people can do that, but a lot of people, they don't have enough money to do that, so they borrow money from banks to do this, right? And a lot of banks just say, okay, I trust you as a consumer, who will probably return all of the money that we're gonna lend you. Banks say that, and banks gonna give you money. Um, However, what happens when their value of houses or market prices of houses is rapidly going down is that a lot of people decide to just default. They just give up. They just realize that, okay, the value of the houses that we own but we're still paying for is lower than what we have to pay, right? Imagine you're paying like in total $250,000 for houses that only worth 150 or $175,000 or something like that. That's horrible. That's a horrible thing that they can ever experience, and a lot of them will just give up and default and tell the banks that we are not paying this back. We're not paying this back. We're not fully paying back the debt that they've got when we purchased this house. A lot of them will tell that to banks. Yeah, what they have to do when they do that, the houses is going to be confiscated, but they just accept it because they know the value of the houses is low anyway. And this is bad news for not only for those people who bought it, but this is horrible news for banks too. Banks realize that a lot of people whom they lended their money to has given up repaying their debt, paying back their debt. That's a horrible thing for banks, because the banks cannot get, even if they confiscate all these houses, the value of these houses that they've just confiscated is still low. They can sell it, they can get back some of their money, but they have made a significant loss. And a lot of banks experienced that, and this led to bankruptcy of some banks or financial institutions, and this also prevented a lot of firms from effectively prevented a lot of firms from borrowing money from banks too, because a lot of banks has lost confidence. A lot of banks realized that they messed up. They lended their money to too many people for those who cannot repay. That lack of confidence by banks also, led to lower investment and lower consumption too. So that's what happened. Those three main things, and production has been cut down. Investment is low, consumption is low. When investment and consumption is low, GDP will be lower than before, because farms would not produce as much things as before. This is what happened in 2008, and unemployment goes up. Same things what I explained before. And let me just draw this on the diagram, which will be very helpful in fully understanding what happened. So we can use different models, but definitely the most useful one, I would say, is ADAS model. We learned that aggregate demand and aggregate supply would help us understand the economic cycle. So we have AS, which is upward leaning, and we have AD, which is downward sloping. We have GDP here, and this is often real GDP. And we have price level, or it can be inflation rate. Both of them works, I would say. Inflation rate. So aggregate demand is how would I explain aggregate demand? It's a demand that the economy has towards all these goods and services that the economy produces, right? And AD shifts to the left when this happens. Remember, household lose their confidence. Household realize that the value of their houses has declined so rapidly. They're gonna be really pessimistic about future, and a lot of them will have actually defaulted too. They all lose confidence. So AD shifts to the left. So this will be new AD, so shifts to the left, and this will change the equilibrium point from here, y1 to y2. and real GDP has shrinked from the beginning. Yes, this is the visual understanding, but to explain it verbally, it's not as complicated. So people have uh, reduced the level of consumption, the quantity that they consume, or quantity that they spend, and firms will realize that soon, and firms will cut down the production. They're gonna they're gonna employ less people, and they're gonna reduce their production of goods and services. So that's gonna happen, and that's gonna coincide with lower inflation. Inflation will probably go down. Sometimes price itself can even go down in the entire economy, which is called deflation. But inflation was very low when 2008 financial crisis happened. Yes, inflation uh, also dropped. And then what's gonna happen is a lot of people get unemployed, right? Because remember, um, let me see if I can visualize that. Okay, it's probably a bit hard. Oops. Okay, I'm not gonna try that actually. Okay, let me try this. So we have full employment level of output around here, right? Somewhere around here. So this will be full employment level of output. This is when unemployment rate is low and all these factors of production are fully utilized in the economy. Maybe unemployment maybe like 3% or 4%, but not higher than that. However, because equilibrium point is now here, from here, unemployment rate has gone up, right? Probably to like 10% or something like that. And when unemployment rate goes up like that, a lot of households lose confidence even further. Although a lot of those unemployed people will stop consumption too. So there is going to be some level of multiplier I would say. So AD will shift further to the left. This is what could happen and what happened, I would say. Yes, this is multiplier. We can also draw a labor diagram to fully understand why unemployment rate goes up that rapidly. Oops. So we have demand curve and we have supply curve, and this is labor market, labor. So the price of labor is wages and quantity of labors. So this is equilibrium point. So this was their wages, and this was the quantity of labors who were employed. However, demand moves to the left. Why? Because firms realize that they don't need as many labors because people are not buying goods and services that they produce, whether they're I don't know, housing companies or construction companies, or it can be any goods and services that were heavily affected. Let's say, okay, we can just say like restaurants, right? People go to restaurants, but when recession happens and they all lose confidence, they're probably gonna just make food at home or buy cheaper food rather than going to expensive restaurants and spend their money. So for the restaurant industry, restaurant firms, they're gonna realize they're employing too many staffs who make food. So they're gonna have less demand for those people, those labors. So demand curve shifts to the left, and we see some new equilibrium point here. However, it wouldn't go here, remember, because labor market is unique. It's different from other market. We have sticky wages, downward rigidity of wage. Wage doesn't go down that easily. Not only because of minimum wage, but it's also because of the social factor. Like if any firms cut wages, that's gonna have a horrible consequence on the firms too, because people are gonna feel so less motivated. People are gonna be really mad and disloyal to the firms. Those laborers will be disloyal and mad to firms when their wages are cut. Their motivation, the level of motivation drop is so high to the extent that firms are too scared to do that. So they're just gonna keep the wages. But when they keep the wages at the point that is not competitive, we're gonna have some market distortion, and that is gonna be unemployment. We're gonna have surplus of labor, which is unemployment. So the quantity supply would be here. Quantity supplied, right? Because wages is still the same. So quantity supplied by the labor is still staying. Then that's not going to change because wages doesn't go down. If wages go down, a lot of people will leave the labor market, so that will go down. But it doesn't change because of the downward rigidity of wages. However, the demand for labors is significantly lower in this scenario. So this will be quantity demanded. And the difference between quantity supplies and quantity demand is surplus of labors. There are too many people who own jobs but who can't get jobs. And this is unemployment. And this happens for any, not any, but almost every market. So that's why we saw very high unemployment, unfortunately, in Great Recession. Um, what else? And also, although I said wages doesn't go down, that's only for laborers who are currently who are still staying in that job. Once they're fired and trying to find a new job, they're gonna realize that they can only get lower wages than before because downward rigidity doesn't apply when you leave the firms and re-enter or get jobs in another market. So, but generally, what I want to emphasize is that wages would generally go down, not because firms cut the wages to the existing employees, but it is probably because some of them get fired, and when they try to find a new job, they're gonna realize that most of the options have offer very low wages, lower wages than before. Okay, let's go back to the note, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it for 2008 financial crisis. Now you know the reason, you know the cause, and we it's very important to understand because it has so much economic concepts in it.